In this video, we're going to be reviewing the Canik MC9 LS Mete. For those who might not be familiar with Caniks, Caniks are made in Turkey and have been imported through Century Arms since 2012. Some of their more common lines they initially came out with included, for example, the TP9s, the Elites. Many of the features that went into the Elites are now incorporated into many of the Mete models that you see today. Looking at the name, this is a micro compact, hence the name MC9, hence the caliber 9mm, and then LS stands for long slide. So the MC9, which originally was the first versions of this, which had a shorter grip and shorter slide, came out in 2023, followed a year later by the MC9L and then the MC9 LS. So, and that's where we came out in late 2024. So basically it is an MC9 with a longer grip and a longer slide, which is an evolution we've seen with a lot of micro compact pistols, which brings me to one initial observation, which is when you look at this gun on the table, it's kind of hard to imagine what the evolution of the micro compact pistol has become since all the different categorization of guns in the marketplace. And the reason why I bring that up is one of the most common compact versions of guns that were out there was the Glock 19. And this was a compact, not a micro compact, but a compact. And this was considered to be, in many cases, the Goldilocks of handguns, meaning people use for the most diverse situations. Everything from concealed carry to duty carry to being able to handle the durability to capacity and things of that nature. And that's why the Glock 19 has been arguably the most successful Glock ever produced, is because it can be used in so many different types of ways. But what's interesting about this is when you look at these just side by side, the Glock 19 to the micro compact Canik, there's not that much difference in size anymore. And when you've seen the evolution of these, and it's important to start with, like for example, the Glock 42 was one of the first micro compacts that came out. This, of course, was in 380. Now, this again is a micro compact. And you look at this side by side from the top down and then from the back forward, you can see the differences that each one of these are classified as a micro compact, but look how much bigger the micro compacts have become. Now let's do this, for example, in comparison to the Glock 19 that I've discussed before. Again, very similar. The barrel is just slightly longer on the Glock 19, but notice the size or the width difference on the Glock 19. And then when you line up the grips are fairly similar, even though there's a capacity difference between the two. And then the final comparison I would do is the 365 XL. And again, this is very similar, not only in width, but also in the height difference is a little bit different because I use the XL frames. There's also a macro frame that's taller than this, but again, very similar. So there's been a lot of good options that have come out in the marketplace, but it is important to mention that the Goldilocks handgun market is the area that I was most interested in because that is the one area that people use guns with the most, unlike, for example, specific types of handguns that are built for specific types of uses. And that's where, in my opinion, this falls into that category. So let's talk about some of the features real quick on the Canik. So the first thing is you're going to notice it has a black nitrided finish on the slide, and they also have an optional Desert FDE Cerakote that you can use as well. I've been using this gun now for about 5 months, quite extensively, and the one things that I really like about it is the finish is held up extremely well, especially for the amount of use that I've put into the gun. Also, there's front and back serrations. There's a metal sights in a dovetail, and then you're going to notice on the rear post it is flattened out and then blackened out, and then the front post is a white dot on here. Again, these are steel sights, dovetailed, so they can easily be changed out. You're going to also notice here I've got my Holosun on here. I have a Holosun 507KX2, which is, in my opinion, one of the best, if not the best, sights for a micro compact pistol, and that's what I put on my guns. But you're going to notice here how deep the cut is into the slide as well. And that's one of the advantages that you have over a lot of other guns that were, when it came to slide mounting, these slide cuts were a lot more shallow. So you can see that here, and then on the Glocks they're a lot more shallow as well, which means a lot of the guns that they decided to put into a red dot model required, suppressor type height sights. They required sights that you can, if you want to co-witness through the glass, you're going to have to be able to raise the sights up. That's not the case here with the Canik, and that's one of the things I really like about the Canik is it's a deep cut in the slide. And what you're going to notice here is when you look through the sights, you can see on standard sights fully through the glass of a 507K. So again, you don't have to change out the sights when you put on your optics system. And you compare that, for example, to a lot of the retrofits. And I call retrofits a lot of the guns that weren't designed for this, that really, when it came time to cutting into the slides, were actually not really well designed for optics mounting. And there's some exceptions to that. There's some older models like my CZ75. I had a custom cut done on this one. You can see, again, I have the same ability to co-witness through here, which is one of the reasons why I love it. It's one of my favorite handguns as well. But this is the one, again, just out of the box. A couple other features you're going to notice on here. Again, all my guns have been safety checked before I operate them. The first thing is there is a striker indicator right here of cocking on the indication. So again, we are clear on here. So when you fire it, the indicator is off. And then there's also, in addition to that, a loaded chamber indicator. So for example, you can have a cocked gun, but not a loaded chamber. And again, the importance of that is not only can you see that, but you can manually check as well to see if you're loaded or not. The barrel on here is a 3.64-inch barrel. So it's basically about a ½ inch longer than the L version of the MC9. And again, disassembly is very similar to, for example, what you would see on a Glock, where you've got the kind of the takedown wings, etc. Now, one of the differences here is it doesn't come all the way forward. It comes forward and then pops out. So that's one of the differences with the Caniks. And again, the internals are very similar, right? The action system, the spring system, everything is very Glock-like, if you will. And the only difference here is, again, you're not going fully down, but you're starting out here, and then you're ready to go again. So that's assembly, disassembly, very simple. If you're used to using striker-proprietary handguns, this should be very second hat to you in that regard. The frame is a polymer striker fire pistol, as we talked about before. It also includes, for example, a 1913 rail mount with a serialized plate below it. So that's where your serialization is going to come in. Again, as we talked about, it has ambi slide locks. And so if you're a lefty, for example, you're going to probably like this more than if you have the limitation of not having an ambi slide lock. There are excellent texturing, not only on the grip, but also on the index pads that are here. And basically what this means is when you're not ready to fire, you can easily feel an index off of the index pad, which is becoming very commonplace now in striker-powered pistols. It comes with 3 back straps, and mostly they're palm swell options. It doesn't really impact the length of pull on the handgun. So I used the one that came with the gun, which was about a medium size. It doesn't make that big of a difference. I've tried all 3. I've got regular size hands, which is like a medium to large size, golf glove, if you will, from Costco in comparison. A couple other things here. It has a flared magwell. You also have an index, a screw hole here, so that if, for example, you like to put lanyard loops on here, you can do that as well. It has the smaller MC trigger guard. And you're going to notice, for example, looking at compared to some of the other guns on the table, the trigger guard is actually a little bit smaller than I would normally like, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And again, if you're an average size hand, it's okay, but you'll notice that, again, it's a little bit smaller. So if you've got big fat fingers or you're wearing gloves, that might be a bit of an issue for you that some people have when they look at this gun. So, and again, this is a problem they largely rectified with the Prime version, which again has the little bit larger trigger guard. And also there is an undercutting on the trigger guard as well. Now, to the trigger, again, we're fully checked here. The trigger includes, for example, the dongle trigger safety like you would typically see on a striker-fired pistol. And again, the break zone is not 90 degrees. So if you watch my previous review on Caniks, people love the Caniks triggers, but one of the things you have to get used to is where the trigger wall breaks at. It breaks farther back than you would normally be used to, for example, in a Glock, or for example, a SIG that would break at 90 degrees. In fact, the pull actually starts at around 90 degrees and breaks back. Now, initially, I didn't like this because I've been trained to have 90-degree breaks all my life. But the more I trained and operated the Canik, the more I actually began to appreciate this trigger. And the great thing about the trigger too, right out of the box, is there's no creep. It's got a very solid wall, and it breaks on my liming gauge right at about 3.2 pounds. And then the reset is nice, short, and audible. Excellent trigger. This is one of the things that when you talk to people that own Caniks, they rave about the triggers, because right out of the box, these are excellent. Some of the best, if not the best, in the striker fired market. Now, when you buy the handgun, it comes with two 17-round magazines. Now, what's interesting about this is you're going to see on the magazine here, there's a bit of an extension plate on here. So basically what they did is they took a 15-round grip, extended it to 17 rounds, and kind of made it flush, if you will. And the other great thing about this is, if you're used to using Caniks, it's similar, for example, to Glocks. A lot of people like Glocks because if you use the double stack magazines, they usually work within various different sizes. For example, a Glock 19 can take Glock 17 mags and things of that nature. Well, you can do the same thing with the Caniks as well. So for example, I've got on the table here a Canik SFT. So this is the full length version. And one of the nice things about this is I can use the SFTs, the Mete magazines, they all work in here. They're all the same size magazine. The difference is just the length. So they're interchangeable. So if you have other Caniks, you're going to really like the fact that you can use them on here as long as, you know, they're at least 18 or 17 rounds or larger. And then the other thing I wanted to point out was one of the differences between this and the SFT, and this goes back to the magazine. So on the SFT, which I have a review on, again, considerably larger. This is more of like your Glock 17 style size, if you will. But again, you can see them side by side. And you're going to notice a couple things here. Even though they both took the same size magazine, notice that the MC9 is considerably slimmer than the SFT. And this is one of the things that I really like. I enjoy shooting. That for some reason, this size on the MC9 is just perfect for my hand. The SFT is okay, but again, it takes the exact same magazines, but you've got a larger width here. And then of course the gun is a little bit wider as well. And then you're going to also notice the takedown wings are a little bit larger on the SFT because it's more of a duty model than the more narrow versions on the MC9. But again, this is one of the great things about the gun is that if you're looking for magazines for the Canik, you can buy the TP9s, the Meta magazines, the Mete magazines, etc., that you find in the store, and they're all going to pretty much work in here as long as they're the correct length. The other thing that I like about the Canik is that these 17-round magazines are true 17-round magazines. So for example, this is a fully loaded 17-round magazine, and you notice that I can do tactical reloads on here very easily without it having to drop out or to force it in. And when I load that 17th round in, I still have a little give on here. Now, that is in comparison, for example, to the SIG P365 17-round magazines that people use in the macros and things of that nature. Because even though they're 17-round magazines, if you watched my reviews previously, you know that I only load these up to 16 rounds. The reason why is if you jam 17th round into these magazines, it's very hard to tactically reload on your SIG P365. And oftentimes what I found when I went through a lot of training with them is that many times they would just drop out. You had to slam them in so hard. It really hurt the reliability. So really a 17-round magazine on a 365 macro is really a 16-round magazine. However, the 17-round magazine, as I showed a moment ago, is a true 17-round magazine on the Canik. The other thing I like about this is, as I mentioned before, the grip angle and the ergonomics are excellent. And when you put this in your hand and you shoot it, you know exactly what I'm talking about, of how well it feels, natural point of aim, etc. It is, and then the other part of that is the recoil impulse of the handgun, which again is excellent. And if you've ever fired one of these, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, just a couple real quick comparisons here. And I want to compare this, for example, to a Glock 19. So the MC9, again with optics on here, comes in just at 2 pounds with a fully loaded 17-round magazine. Now, I also have a fully loaded 15-round magazine, Glock, and it comes in at the identical weight. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm getting 2 additional rounds. I'm getting a slimmer handgun than the Glock 19. I don't need to make any modifications to the trigger on this, etc. I don't need to do any optics cuts. I don't have to change my iron sights if I want to run a red dot on here, and the ergonomics are excellent. So really, this is one of the reasons why I'm become a big proponent now of the MC9 LS, is because out of the box, this is just one of the excellent options on the marketplace today. Now, the other thing I would tell you is when you buy these, Canik is kind of known for giving you a kit. And in this, you'll see, for example, the back straps. They got little tools and cleaning tools, etc. But in here, they also include 2 17-round magazines with a loader, and then this holster right here. And this holster is actually really good for light duty. It's got light retention, so you can see it kind of clips in there, but you can switch this around to inside outside the waistband as well. So if you're one of these casual shooters that will occasionally go to the range or occasionally go shooting or things like that, this might be just good enough for you. You might not have to buy another holster, just because, again, this will suffice for many people in many situations that do light duty type, target shooting or going out to the range for the day, etc. For those that want to do a little bit more carry, one of the holsters that I recommend is the Craft holster, and this is one of them here. And Craft really makes nice leather holsters, and in this case for the Canik, it has a retention system that is a thumb brake retention system, which is something that I like to carry. I originally started out as a 1911 guy when I was really young, so I'm used to thumb brake safeties, and when I carry with holsters, I typically like to have some type of positive retention system, and this is one of my favorites, at least that I've used. There are other ones that come out there, but again, when you're looking for holsters, for example, that have optics on here, things of that nature, it can become somewhat limiting as to what are available on the market today. At least for me, what I prefer is I buy and I use these Craft holsters. They're just really good, and I got a thumb brake safety, and then I can pull out from the holster, and again, it keeps it in good shape and it looks really nice. So there are options on the market today. If you don't want to use just the basic plastic holster that they provide by Canik, you do have another option for that as well. The final thing I would say is, as we talked about before, there's a difference between the SFTs, the TP9s, and the MC9s. And again, one of those big differences I showed earlier is, even though it's taking the same magazines, it is a slimmer profile. So when you line these up, again, you're getting a slimmer profile, which carries better. To me, it handles better. And I just like them a lot better than even the SFTs. That's why I've been shooting this a lot more, and it's become, for example, my Goldilocks type gun. The other thing about this, as I mentioned before, compared to the Glock 19, it is slimmer. It's got a slightly shorter slide, deeper optics cuts, metal sights, 17-round magazines. There's just a lot of advantages there for a gun that typically sells for a couple $100 less than, for example, a Glock 19 when you buy them. And as I mentioned before, compared to the 365 macro, it's got deeper optics cut. It's got a similar width in barrel length, but it's got a 1 round capacity more in the macro side to be able to do tactical reloads than, for example, you can do with the 365. And the accuracy that I've had with the MC9 is on par with some of the best handguns that I have. And a lot of people say, well, is that because of the gun or is it because of you? Well, the reality is you have to find a handgun, in my experience, that is very comfortable to shoot, that holds well, it has great ergonomics, and the accuracy is going to follow. Most handguns will shoot much better than the individual shooting them. At least for me personally, I can shoot as accurate with this handgun as anything else on this table. And the only reason why is because it is so ergonomically well suited for my hand, my shooting style, both single as well as double hand. Trigger's excellent. Everything about it is, to me, makes for a amazingly accurate gun. The final thing is, if you're looking, for example, a ported guns, Mete also makes an MC9 Prime, which I've alluded to earlier. And the Prime basically is the same size handgun, but it's got porting and it's got some other changes, some cosmetic changes and improvements, etc. It's the same type of trigger, although the trigger is actually a better quality. But again, I don't feel like the quality of this is bad at all, but it's the same type of trigger pull. But the one main difference is, if you watch any of my previous videos, you know that unless you're shooting competition, I'm not a proponent of porting on a handgun. There's multiple reasons I've talked about for multiple years why I'm not a fan of them at all. Again, if you're shooting competition, that's fine, but if it's for self-defense and carry, I will never carry ported handguns, and that's why I really don't have an interest in getting the Prime, even though the Prime has a couple other things that I would have liked on this handgun. For example, the biggest thing of which is the longer the trigger guard, which again would be better suited for this. And I think it's something easily that Canik, if you're watching, you could fix this. Just basically throw the Prime slide on your existing MC9 LSs, or at least just extend it like you did with the Prime, and that would solve a lot of problems. But again, I'm not going to buy the Prime because I'm not a fan of ported handguns for self-defense. It's just that simple. Final things, what are some of the improvements I would make on this handgun? Again, Canik, if you're watching, here's some of the things I would do. The first thing is the white dot on the front of the slide is okay, but honestly, I think you'd be better served if you had like a blaze orange with a tritium white center or something of that nature that can make it stand out a little bit more. It's not bad. It's just there's some people that are going to want to have a better, more prominent front sight. The other thing, which is the main thing that I would change on here, is the larger trigger guard. A third thing is I would include a threaded barrel option. At least at the time of this filming, there is not a threaded barrel option for this. But what I found with Canik is many cases after their handguns have been out a while, they do offer threaded barrel versions. So there might be one down the road already, but I would include that as an option for some people, for example, that want to run muzzle brakes or run cans or things like that, or just have a little bit longer barrel for a little bit better velocity through their 9mm. The final thing I would say is to Canik would be, right now when you buy these, you're pretty much stuck with these 17 round magazines. And if you know, when you concealed carry, one of the things that prints the most is right off your grip. And just this little extension on the grip might be reason enough for somebody maybe not to carry this handgun, because it makes it just a little bit longer than they might want to carry. Now, here's the good news for a lot of people on the Canik side, is if you look at the SF magazine, this is the 15 round magazine, this is a 17 round magazine. When you look at them side by side, they're the exact same length metal magazine. The only difference is on the base plate. On the base plate for the MC9, what they did is they extended it to include 2 additional rounds, which you can see are marked in there. Otherwise, it's the exact same magazine, as I talked about earlier, as the 15 round magazine. Now, if you buy a 15 round magazine, at least at the time of filming right now, it won't fit in here. It's close, but it won't fit, because what happens is the base plate is rounded and not contoured, similar to what you see here on this magazine, and therefore you won't be able to slam it home. Now, one of the things I did is I took a 15 round magazine that you would normally find for an SF, and what I did is I mirrored the contouring on the base plate to what you would normally find, for example, will work in this gun, and then voila, I have a 15 round magazine that works in here. It's the exact same magazine. All I had to do was contour the base plate to be able to work in this. And then you now have a fully operational 15 rounds, so if you want to concealed carry, you can see that it shortens the gun up a little bit. It creates a little bit less of a print, because a lot of people, when they conceal carry, want to have that smaller print, and then their backups, they might carry, you know, for example, a magazine with a few more round capacity. But this is one of the options, at least that I found, of a workaround for me. Now, if Canik wanted to fix this for everybody, all they'd have to do is take their regular SF 15 round magazine and then add an additional base plate in that magazine box when you buy this, similar to what SIG does. SIG will provide additional base plates based upon the configuration and size of the handgun. Canik could easily do this. These are usually made by Metcar. I believe almost all of their magazines are made by Metcar, which are excellent magazines. And again, if Metcar wanted to do that, they could easily do that, create a contour plate similar to what I have here, and just include that with the regular SF, and then you have a 15 round magazine Canik that will work in here as well. So that's one of the additional things that I would suggest to Canik to make what is already an excellent gun absolutely phenomenal. So again, the magazine, do the base plates for the 15 rounders, extend the trigger well, and then some of the other things I talked about. Those are the 2 major things. And those would be reasons enough why I would probably never move off this platform, at least in the foreseeable future, because this is the gun that I've been grabbing almost every day out of my safe when I go to shoot. And I've been doing that for the past 5 months. And when you have a lot of options like I do. I review a lot of handguns. When you're pulling this out, that's basically telling you, hey, this is the gun you really like. So final observations, Caniks are very affordable, but they're one of the best values, if not the best values in the marketplace. Don't look at the price tag of a Canik when you're looking at this and say, hey, I can maybe save a couple $100, give or take, off of some of the more popular handguns, that they're less value. At least in my experience so far, having fired this through everything that I use it for, this is no less quality handgun than any of the others I have on the table. It's a better value because it comes at a lower price. For me, this is a better Goldilocks gun than the Glock 19, and now in many cases it's better than the 365 because I don't want to take the 365 out for a heavy dosage of shooting, for example, in a target range where we're doing tactical shooting. That's something I do now with my Canik. I have no reservations about carrying my 365 and bringing it with me. But again, the Goldilocks gun, again, as I alluded to earlier, is the gun that does everything. And that's the one thing I still don't really like doing with my 365 that I'm now doing with my Canik. So again, the other thing I like about this, it is designed for optics. It is not an afterthought. It has got really nice cuts. It's co-witnessed well. It's very comfortable to fire, extremely accurate, excellent trigger, all of this right out of the box. And then again, you can mount on here without any types of mounting plates to have to raise up your optics, and then of course have to replace your sights. The final thing I would say about Canik is, one of the things I really like about Canik in the times I've been reviewing them is they tend to innovate really fast, unlike some of the other vendors that we all know about in the industry. And the reality is, I think that this is very close to becoming, in my opinion, the standard micro-compact Goldilocks type pistol on the market today, with a few small changes again to the trigger guard, a couple other base plate options for the carry, things of that nature. This could be the best gun on the marketplace to me as far as value, price, and reliability. Again, this is the one I've been pulling out for the past 5 months, and I continue to do so, and every day it surprises me how great of a gun this is and how great of a value it is. So that's my review of the Canik MC9 LS Mete. If you have a chance to fire one, pick one up and shoot it, and you'll know what I'm talking about. If you like this video or like this channel, please subscribe on YouTube, and thanks for watching.